My name is Jason S.C. Fung, the host of Vanilla Club podcast. Today's episode is with Kelly Burke. If we were to introduce Kelly Burke from his email signature, we would cite him as a wannabe professional skier, Irishman, political commentator, and examiner of the law. Kelly was elected district attorney for Georgia's Houston County for nearly 14 years. And beyond his life as DA, he's also been a magistrate judge and worked in private practice. We came across Kelly's story in a New York Times article earlier this year entitled, "For Decades, He Has Regretted Sending a Man Away for Life. Can He Fix It?" In 1998, at the age of 24, Jessie Askew Jr. was convicted of armed robbery, kidnapping, and aggravated assault related to a robbery at Morrison's Cafeteria in Warner Robins, Georgia. As a result of Georgia's new recidivist law for repeat offenders, Jesse Askew Jr. was sentenced to life, as it turns out, without the possibility of parole. As Kelly's career as DA progressed and he was exposed to cases of much more horrific crimes, his perspective on things began to change. He realized that he'd been too hard on Jesse Askew and that he was not deserving of a lifelong sentence, especially one without the possibility of parole. Kelly began to advocate for Jesse's resentencing and then doubled down after his cancer diagnosis in 2017. After making it out of hospice 3 times, Kelly is convinced that the reason he is still here is to help Jesse Askew. This episode is a story of honesty, accountability, and forgiveness. Kelly's outlook on life really moved us and reminded us that a simple, healthy life often begins with a clear conscience. We hope you enjoy. Good day, sir. Good evening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on. This is actually a show about, we call ourselves a wellness show. And you know what? I think that there's a lot of people who are doing wellness who are talking about optimization. They're talking about being a high achiever. They're talking about being elite. And we thought, you know what? Because as you can see behind us, we're vanilla growers in North Queensland. This is our vanilla extract that we make. We thought that we would do a show where we would ask everyday people that we come across, not necessarily celebrities, not necessarily people who are at the top of their game in terms of health and wellness, to come on the show and let's just talk. And let's talk about things that relate sometimes back to overcoming sometimes the trauma that we face in our day-to-day lives. So again, thank you so much for taking the time with us. This began, we reached out to you, sir, on the basis of the New York Times article in February of this year, which was a striking article. And I think, caught a lot of national attention in the US. But even for us here in Australia, we picked it up. And I thought, it'd be an interesting opportunity for you to talk a little bit about your background with respect to that case, how it relates back to your own physical challenges with cancer. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you were a district attorney going back to the 90s, right? I think you were an elected official. You served for, I think it was, I read 14 years as district attorney.
Right.
And in a sense, you lived different lives, which was interesting to me because you were a district attorney, an elected official, then you worked in private practice. And then in this case that's featured in the New York Times, when I first read it, it almost sounded like you were a public defender. So I don't know if you could take a little bit of time to tell us a little bit about your involvement in that case and your perspective in it.
Sure. Well, when it happened, I'd only been DA for about 1 year. And I was really trying to make my mark on the office. And when this robbery happened, it was a pretty big deal. Robbery, Jesse and Pedro held up at Morrison's Cafeteria, which is a very nice cafeteria. Put everybody in the freezer, and then they took the money out of the office. They weren't very good at what they did. A lot of things backfired on them, but they got away. And within short order, the police were on their trail. With the police and I had a really good relationship, and so they let me know what had happened. And I even went down to the station and watched from video as they interviewed Jesse and Pedro. And I said, look, guys, this is a great job. You've done a fantastic job. I'm personally going to handle this case. So I did have my chief assistant. He and I worked on it together and brought it to trial. Jesse had two very young, but very smart attorneys, and I really wasn't anticipating the case would go all the way to a jury trial because the evidence was so overwhelming. I mean, there was no doubt that Jesse and Pedro did it. During the trial, Pedro pled guilty. And so we agreed to 15 years to do 10 years in prison. I went over to Jesse with his two attorneys and I said, all right, you got to do more than Pedro, because Pedro did it first. But, come on, you can't win this case. And I don't think they intended to irritate me, but their response irritated me.
Mm.
The response was essentially, go sit down at the table, Mr. DA. We want a trial. I'm like, all right, you're going to get a trial. And I had told them about recidivist. And it was a brand new law that we had. And there was 2 kinds of recidivist. And Jesse qualified for the worst. And that is that 3 prior felonies. And a 4th one means you get the maximum sentence without parole. Well, in Georgia, the maximum sentence for armed robbery or kidnapping is life in prison. So the jury came back in no time with the guilty conviction. And then I told the judge I was invoking recidivist. And the judge was, I'm going to tell you, he was not happy.
Mm-hmm.
He thought I was being too hard.
Mm.
And I was saying like, yeah, you be the judge, I'll be the DA, don't worry about it. So I stuck to my guns and said, life-without-parole. And when I did that, his family, who'd been sitting in the trial, been very respectful, no problems. His family kind of gasped, like, what?
Wow.
And I thought, has nobody told you all what's about to happen? I mean, I was kind of surprised that they didn't know this was coming. So obviously, it had not been discussed with Jesse's family. Now, he was 23, 24 years old. Technically, it's his decision. But still, his family, I thought, should have known. So the judge imposed that sentence. And to tell the truth, I was done with it. I was fine, all right, next. And for about 10 years, I really didn't think about it. But after about 10 years, I thought, you know, I was really too hard on Jesse Askew. I shouldn't have done that. So I was still DA. I went to the parole board and I said, hey, I changed my mind, get him out. And one of my friends was on the parole board and he called me up and said, Terry, I can't let him out. I said, why not? I said, well, the sentence is what the sentence is. And I said, Bob, parole has never meant what parole says in all my life. They say one thing, but they do another. Come on. Yeah. And Bob says, tell that they're not going to change their mind. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. So then I'm like, oh. So I went to the judge who was mad at me the first time. I said, do you remember that case? He says, yeah. I said, well, I'm going to give him a good trial. And the judge said, why? I said, because I've changed my mind. And he said, well, that's not good enough. I said, you were the one that was mad about it. Because I am mad about it. But I can't just change it because you change your mind. I mean, I kind of knew that was going to happen, but I was hoping the judge would say, yeah. So ever since then, I've been trying to help Jesse Askew there's a new sentencing where the state will waive the recidivist and let him go off for time served. But that's what the New York Times article is about. So, for the past probably 15 years, I've been trying to help Jesse this new sentence. And that's where we're at right now.
I think one of the reasons why the story is so interesting is that for the general public, we watch Law and Order. We know Sam Waterston. We know these pop culture figures who are DAs. And to us, the general public, it seems like most DAs worry about their conviction rate. That's a very important statistic for them. So I think your story is so interesting because you just don't hear this. I've never heard of this, right? My brother is an attorney. I've never heard of a case where a district attorney, emeritus, takes up this case, sees this injustice, right? And I think, understands the intricacies of this law, right? In Georgia, this 4 strikes you're out law, and decides to do what he can to try to ameliorate the situation.
It's, I'm going to say that all of my attorney friends think I'm crazy. I haven't met any opposition from any of my old DA friends. They all just say, well, wouldn't bother me, but if that's what you want to do that. And that's really the sentiment in the prostitution community is, well, if Terry wants to release this guy, there must be something to it. But I put over 10,000 people in prison over 13 years. He's the only one.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
I think I beat it out. I was too hard on him. And I blame myself. I don't blame Jesse. He got himself in trouble. But I don't blame him for his sentence. I don't blame his attorneys for the sentence. But I blame myself. Because in hindsight, I was just too hard on him. I didn't need to be that hard. If I had said, Judge, give him 20 years without parole, we wouldn't be here. So I blame myself. And I'm sorry Jesse's going through it. And I'm doing everything I can to help him.
So the facts were that, again, he held up this cafeteria, this restaurant, and the weapon that he was brandishing happened to be unloaded.
Well, he says that, but
He says that, okay.
the problem is when that gun pointed at you, who knows, right?
Who knows? Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
So he's using a weapon, but nobody got hurt. Being locked in the freezer is no big deal because there's an opening from inside. And so what happened is Jesse and Pedro went in the office, all the victims ran out and
Mm.
ran out the back door and ran to the grocery store and told the police. So nobody got hurt, but Jesse says that shotgun wasn't loaded, but then why did you take the shotgun, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
They're trying to scare people. And it worked. But it was everybody, there were 15 victims, I believe, who went into the tour.
Mhm.
So,
And of course, if there could have been a mishap, there could have been a mistake. Once, so I don't think there's any question that he did something wrong, right?
oh,
The
yeah.
the issue
Right.
at hand is that I think this is his 26th or 27th year in prison, right? And according to what I've read about, your comments on the case, that, if as you alluded to earlier, if he'd done, he's time served. I mean, or even 15 years would be commensurate with the crime that was committed.
That's why, in hindsight, I wish I'd asked for 15 or
Okay.
even 20, but I didn't.
And then because again, it seems like some of the recidivist statutes, like in California they have the is it 3 strikes and you're out. I mean, it seems
Right.
like they've rolled some of that back though, haven't they? I read somewhere that in 2012 they softened that out. I mean, there's many cases you hear about, again, people have committed 2 felonies. The third one is relatively minor, someone stealing golf clubs or, something not anywhere near the threshold of a violent crime, getting locked up for life.
Georgia has not backed down
Mhm.
on recidivists. And I don't know if they ever will, but I'm doing what I can to modify that law
Okay.
so that Jesse will be able to have his sentence reviewed by the judge. So hopefully that works, but I won't know until next year when the legislature meets is when we'll find out if that law passes. A
Yeah.
friend of mine's pushing the law, and we'll see what happens.
When I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, I came across you had a personal blog that you only had one entry for, speaking about your Irish background. I don't know if that was written by you. There's a one-page blog that talks about your family's background in County Mayo.
I'm not sure. I have a blog.
Okay.
I have a webpage with hundreds and hundreds of
Oh, really?
articles about my Irish roots. So I don't know how
Okay.
one of them set up. I don't know.
Oh, okay, maybe there was just one. Okay, but anyways, the one that I saw that said that, again, you have roots that go back to the west coast of Ireland, to County Mayo, and then the irony of County Mayo and that background, and then the next article that I read was that your doctor who gave you the initial cancer diagnosis was from the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah, isn't that
Okay.
funny?
Isn't that funny? Okay, so I didn't misread that.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I read there was an article in the Macon in the Telegraph talking about, I think in 2017, it talks about your diagnosis. It talks about your return from the ski trip, and it also mentioned some anecdotes about how you'd gotten, you had a bad habit as a child getting sunburned repeatedly, right?
For the Irish background.
Is it? Yeah.
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 I have
And
real that skin. The worst skin to have.
mhm.
I had it. And I probably should have been in a bubble all my life. But I went skiing and water skiing and outdoors. And anyway, I got sunburned all the time.
Mm.
So now I have cancer to the point I'm going back to my excuse me, dermatologist tomorrow.
Mm.
I have another one taken off. It's just those who've been a fair-haired, red-headed Irishman.
Mm. So it was a squamous cell carcinoma.
Right,
Is that right?
right there,
Wow.
right on my chin.
Wow. And then it.
I've had a bunch of them, but that was the one that tried to kill me. Because it traveled by my nose to my brain stem. And that's what the problem was.
And that's where I think the doctors that were quoted in the Telegraph piece were saying that, again, this was very hard to diagnose, and that it's quite a novel case.
99.4% of the time, squamous travels by blood.
Mhm.
And so it goes in the bloodstream and it settles into this area by the ear, and doctors can go in, cut it out, you're fine.
Mm. Mm.
Maybe radiation, maybe chemo, but you'll be all right. But mine, because it traveled by nerve, went to my spinal cord, and that just never happens,
Mm. Mm.
except for me. And so that's why I'm in the set by me. Oh well.
Mm.
How has your confrontation with your own mortality affected your view of the Askew case?
Very few people knew about Jesse Askew and what I was trying to do until I almost died. And that's kind of when it started to bubble up. And I would tell people, I'm convinced one of the reasons I'm still here is to help Jesse Askew. And they would say, who's Jesse Askew? And now I would tell them a story.
Wow.
My wife knows about it, of course. My kids all know about it. In fact, one of them today said, Dad, if something happens to you, I will continue to fight for Mr. Askew. I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, I mean, I really feel like I don't have a direct reason for why I'm still here. I mean, I went in hospice 3 different times.
Really? Well,
Yeah, they said bye. Told my wife she's a real hero in all this because she would never listen to him. And she would always push for more options. And she never told me that the doctors thought I was done. And so I didn't know him better. I just kept on living. And here I am. It's been 8 years since the original diagnosis. Cancers come back, I don't know how many times,
hmm
3 or 4 times, I guess. And I've done every experimental drug they have. And right now, I'm cancer free. But who knows?
Congratulations. Yeah.
I don't know if that lasts another 0 to 10 years. I don't know.
And you had a great line that you've got to outlive Keith Richards, right?
I
That's
thought,
you've got a
I
second
thought
reason to
that,
live.
I thought
Jesse
that
Askew
was a,
and the
yeah,
Rolling Stones.
yeah, I thought that was a given.
Yeah.
But turns out, I think it's going to outlive me. Who knows?
Well, they've been saying that about Keith Richards probably for 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
looked horrible for 50 years.
So you just got to keep fighting. You just got to keep rocking.
Yeah. So we actually went and saw him and the Stones in concert the year right before I got my cancer diagnosis.
oh, awesome. Where
I
was that?
in Atlanta
Okay. Wow.
at Georgia Tech, where I went to
Okay,
college.
right.
Progress and service.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yellow Jackets.
yeah, those Jackets.
Go Jackets.
We've had an Australian player for the past 3 years, a punter.
All right. Yeah. There's a few. There's a few that have crossed over from AFL.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
he graduated, so we don't have him anymore. But
Wow. Going back to the squamous, again, like I having the bald head, I've been severely sunburned 2 or 3 times, going fishing. With cracked skin and peeling, and it's something that we just can't get, caught out. In this country, they're very good about doing skin checks, and there's a lot of public health messaging on the topic. But I don't know if you had any general advice to people about skin cancer and prevention and the perils of taking this too lightly.
I have what's called Fitzpatrick #1, skin. Worst thing you can have. The surgery I have tomorrow
Mhm.
will be number 72
72.
been cut off of me. My wife has the same skin, but she takes care of herself. She's never had one.
Mm.
Now, she takes care of herself. Her mother put sunscreen on her. She's got red hair, fair skin, beautiful. So somehow she never gets any, and I get 72. And they're still popping up.
Mm.
But in my case, it's from a history. I've been in son abuse. And eventually that history catches up with you. And I've had melanoma, I've had squamous, I've had basal,
Mm.
I've never had melanoma. So that is great news. Melanoma is a hard one to win in.
Yeah. So when we talk about prevention for skin cancer, I mean, it seems like there's chemical prevention, sunscreen, and so forth. There's mechanical, right, with topical with coverage clothing, wearing long sleeves and so forth. Do you have any advice in this regard?
I actually went out this morning, overcast, doesn't matter. I put on my big brim hat.
Yep.
I put on a long sleeves shirt, and I went out and did my gardening. But I don't go out now, especially if my wife is around. I don't go outside without the right kinds of clothing on me. But if I'm going to be outside for more than 5 minutes, it's get a hat, get a shirt, spray my hands, whatever I have to do, because it was wholly preventable.
Mm.
In hindsight, it was wholly preventable. And my kids are all doing great with it because we always preach that to them about taking care of their skin.
And they're good about it.
And they're great about it. And they're great about their children. So they have me as a poster boy for what happens if you're not paying attention. One time when I was in high school, I went water skiing. I got burned so bad that I missed a week of school. I couldn't go to school for like
Wow.
10 days.
Wow.
I mean, that's terrible.
So I think we've discovered more and more reasons to keep going. One is Jessie Askew Jr. Two is Rolling Stones and outliving Keith Richards. Three is to be a poster child for your kids, grandkids, and other people about prevention and sun protection.
Absolutely. I mean, Mayo was the best hospital in the world. People from all over the world come to Mayo. And I met a bunch of them. And Mayo told us from the start, tell it, you may not make it. And I said, all right, well, you'll learn something from treating me. Use that to help other people. And they were like, wow, she's got a great attitude about it. I said, I've had an incredible life. What a great life I've had. How am I going to complain about anything? But I was like, do the best you can. If you need a guinea pig, hey, I'm here. And that one of the drugs they used on me, I was the first patient at Mayo to get that drug. So, and it wasn't really expected the help that saved my life. So I told him, hey, just if helping me helps somebody else, that's fine with me.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we, think about, it's a cliche, but, having a clear conscience, like when I read the story, with Jesse and the way that you've characterized it, I mean, how important is having a clear conscience for you?
Well, it's very important. It's part of why I'm still working for that. But I'm doing everything I can to help him. What's disappointing is that the justice system isn't listening. And for years, I was a big advocate for the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a defender of it. But right now, I gotta tell you, I'm not a defender when it won't listen.
Mm-hmm.
And any reasonable person who hears about Jesse Askew says he shouldn't be in prison for that long. The victims of the armed robbery, all the ones that I've talked to, have all said, oh yeah, we never thought he'd go to prison for that long. So nobody thinks he should still be in prison. Yet, it's been hard to get the justice system to listen. And that's disappointing. And so that's why I proposed this new law that would allow people who've gotten a really stiff sentence after the service of so many years to be able to go back and ask for a reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they did it, but they'll be able to ask and say, hey, I've been in jail for 26 years for armed robbery. No shot that fired, nobody that hurt. And my prior felonies were stupid because Jesse's prior felonies were all dumb. So
You mentioned the justice system, and I wanted to ask you, is it fair to say that class plays a role in Jesse's case, and if race plays a role in Jesse's case?
I've wondered about that. Because what I wonder is if they had not been so flippant with me in the courtroom and got me mad, would I even ask for recidivist?
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, what they said wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had had a more maturity or a thicker skin, I wouldn't have been insulted. But it kind of irritated me. And I don't know if that was classism, racism, I'm not sure. I just know in hindsight, I never really believed that parole was going to start following the rules. Because boy, that didn't normally.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I've asked and says, yeah, back then I remember they used to, murder was a life sentence. In Georgia, that meant 7 years. But parole went from life meant 7 years to, in Jesse's test, life means life. I'm like, wow. So I fault myself for why we're fighting this war. And I gotta say this, Jesse Askew has been a wonderful example of forgiveness because he's been nothing but kind to me. As he and I have corresponded back and forth over this, he has been not bitter, not mean, not mad, not anything. He's been great.
Wow.
And he said, well, when I get out, Mr. Burke, I'm hardly ready to write you a letter. I said, a letter? I said, I'm going to miss the barbecue. What are you talking about? And he said, you with Tom? I said, yeah, Tom. I said, wow, that'd be great. So he's had a wonderful attitude about it. I'm not sure I would have had a wonderful attitude, but he's had a wonderful attitude, and that's part of why I want to help him so bad.
In a sense, he's an example of the non-recidivist, right? He's showing that he's repentant. He's showing that, he's someone that's potentially, he's done his time.
Yeah, yes, and by all times he's been excellent prisoner, runs a ministry out of his soul, was out by counselors, the fellow inmates, guards, all things the world of him. So I'm going to help. I really do. And I hope I'm of some help. I mean, his chance without me was pretty bad. But even with me, here we are. I've been fighting this fight for 15 years.
What do his family think of you?
I'm not sure. I haven't really
Have you
talked to him.
corresponded with them at all?
Just with Jesse. I will say this a long time ago, but in the courtroom, they were very respectful and very nice the whole time. They weren't, one side courtrooms is defendant, the other side is the victims, but they were always very nice and gracious. Would hold the door open for them, said good morning, good afternoon, and that's why I felt bad for him when I said that's going to be life-without-parole, and they all gasped, and I really felt bad for him.
Because I think I read somewhere.
They should have known that.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I read somewhere that there was some claim that they made that Jesse's lawyer had never received a plea deal from you. That it was that they had no knowledge that there was a plea deal that was ever offered.
That's what they said.
Yeah, right.
It was not in writing. It was done in the courtroom, and they blew me off.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, is it the only reference I have is Law and Order for that? I mean, in popular culture, I mean, it's not like these things come in engraved invites. It's a tap on the shoulder on the way back from the men's room.
Right.
Do you want a plea? Are you going to take the plea or not? And you got 30 seconds by the time I wash my hands to make up your mind.
That happens. And it happened to me a lot. I've been on both sides of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Normally, we provide a written plea offer. I'm going to say that. Normally, we do a written plea offer. But not for kidnapping and armed robbery.
No, yeah.
It's like, nah. And so I didn't make written plea offers on most of my serious cases. But the attorneys were always invited, welcome, come into my office, tell me the guy wants to pay, what them we work out. That never happened. I don't know if it's because attorneys were very new at practicing law, or if somehow they got the feeling I was unapproachable. I'm not sure. But we never had that discussion.
Is it on the prosecutor? Is there some, and again, maybe it's not, it's not written into a job description, but do you think that there's some moral or ethical obligation that prosecutors have to help poor people with less access to the system, with fewer resources, to help navigate the system?
Yeah, but he had 2 private attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So he wouldn't have fallen in my definition of somebody without access.
Mm-hmm.
He's got 2 private lawyers that were not public defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I to tell a family you should have hired so-and-so, yeah? I don't do that. I just say, all right, here we go.
There we go.
And there were murder cases I took to trial, but I never made a plea offer. So, yeah, I mean, the judge would say, Mr. Burke, does it matter with a plea offer? I said, well, this is with the defense attorney standing there. I said, well, we want him to go away for the rest of his life. And it's pretty obvious that he doesn't want to do that. So there's not a whole lot of middle ground there, Judge. Yeah. Is it guilty or it's not guilty? And I never lost a murder case, so I guess I got right. But this idea that is the defendant entitled to know what's going to happen to them, I think they are, yeah. But unfortunately, it just depends on how good the attorney is sometimes. But I think I'm going to make it clear I'm not blaming Mr. Davis and Mr. Felton at all. Both of them are fine attorneys. They made good careers. I practiced in law, and I wish them the best. Um, I I blame myself on this one.
Well, if you can, you know, using your numbers of 10,000, right? That you've had that many cases that you've been party to, and I guess if you've only got one that keeps you up at night, that's a 1 to 10,000 is a pretty good ratio.
It is, unless you're that one. And that's what I'm doing is I'm trying to make it so it's not even that one. So, I mean, I'm proud of my career as of today. I loved it. It's great. The viewers may wonder why there's dropout bidding today. Well, the advertisers is to start looking at the sewer plant. Eventually, the time to smell that sewage. And I've been there long enough.
Yeah.
I had a retirement. I wasn't eligible for it, but I had vested in retirement. And so I might go do something else. There's somebody else busy at. I said 14 years. I was there 13 years, 4 months. Technically, almost 13. But in my county, that is still the longest serving DA ever.
Wow.
So since I left, there have been 3 delays in my place. So you have to run for election, so you better be doing a good job. And even then, you've been doing a good job and brighter, smarter, more fluent, attractive person shows up, and the voters say, yeah, maybe we need a new DA after all. That never happened to me, but I didn't want it to.
And then, did you enjoy private practice after you retired as DA? Yeah.
I love private practice. I've been able to do whatever I wanted all my life, which is why I've had a great career, a great life. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a judge, I've been a private practice attorney. Yeah, it's been a great ride.
Is faith a big part of your life?
It is. I'm a believer.
It's a great story you have, and it's a great life you've lived so far. I mean, you've got, as we discovered on this episode, there's 3 and many more reasons.
The 3 big ones. You
I
keep
have
on going.
4 grandchildren I did not have when the cancer hit. And I got more coming, they're just not here yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm hoping for about a dozen.
Okay. Oh, that's a great target.
My younger kids are like, we don't know about that, Dad.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you again so much for sharing your story. It's an inspiring story because, we started this podcast series really trying to talk about what we call simple wellness, which, I asked that question about the clear conscience, and I think to me, simple wellness is really, it's not about being the fittest. It's not about having the best blood work or the fewest markers of disease or anything like that. It's something more akin to having a clear conscience. And I think you're a great, example of that.
So I thank you, sir.
I thank you. Go Yellow Jackets. All right.
Always.
I'm a USC Trojan, but I will be, I've always liked Georgia Tech. It's great school, nerd university.
Thank you.
Yeah. All the best, and I wish you good health. Okay, we'll be in touch when the show launches.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Good health.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right.
Take
See you.